I have on a red sweater this morning in the hopes that Christmas is not too far away for all of us, including the members of Congress. With that in mind, let me give everyone an update on where we are. Yesterday, the Democratic leader and I reached a procedural agreement to create space for ongoing negotiations over government funding. To provide flexibility as the White House and Senate Democrats continue their discussions, the Senate will officially proceed to the House-passed, the Senate already officially proceeded to the House-passed funding legislation, so that's pending. But we did so with an understanding that no further votes will occur until the President and Senate Democrats have reached an agreement to resolve this. Let me say that again. We pushed the pause button until the President, from whom we will need a signature, and Senate Democrats, from whom we will need votes, reach an agreement. No procedural votes, no test votes, just a meaningful vote on a bipartisan agreement whenever that is reached. And it's my hope that it's reached sooner rather than later. It is no mystery why securing our nation's borders is such a major priority for Republicans here in the Senate and Republicans over in the House and for President Trump. Any look at the plain facts leads to one simple conclusion. The crisis of security at our southern border is real. Over the past year, Customs and Border Protection's records of apprehensions and interdictions at our southern border are literally, Mr. President, staggering. 800 known gang members, a 50% increase over last year. Nearly 7,000 individuals with criminal histories, including weapons trafficking and violent offenses. More than double the levels of fentanyl, along with other illicit substances. So the report card is quite clear. America's borders are in crisis. These facts I've stated are not partisan facts. They aren't ideological. They're just facts. They don't describe the Republican Party's version of events or the president's version of events. They describe reality. So one would think that securing our homeland, controlling our borders, and protecting the American people would be bipartisan priorities. Uncontroversial, common sense, bipartisan priorities, a core duty of any nation's government. And here's the interesting thing. Until very, very recently, Mr. President, that seemed to be the case. Back in 2006, Democrats were perfectly happy to support hundreds of miles of physical barriers along the border. 26 Democrats voted for the bill, including then-Senator Obama, then-Senator Clinton, and my good friend, the current Democratic leader from New York. But what about more recently? Earlier this year, Mr. President, the Democratic leader offered $25 billion for physical barriers in his negotiations with the president. 5 times as much as the White House is reasonably requesting right now. And that was just earlier this year. Republicans in the House and in the Senate believe the House's provision for $5 billion in border funding plus additional disaster funding was completely reasonable. I was glad to vote to advance that legislation yesterday. My colleagues and I are proud to stand with the American people on this subject for the safety of American families and the health and security of our communities. But this time, This time, Democrats have rejected that reasonable request. They've refused to meet President Trump halfway and provide even one-fifth of the resources for the border they were willing to provide just a few months ago. Just a few months ago. There's no bright line of principle that separates hundreds of miles of physical barriers in 2006 from new physical barriers in 2018. There is no major philosophical shift that made $25 billion for border security worthwhile just a few months ago, but makes a far more modest investment of $5 billion immoral, and unacceptable today? No, Democrats haven't rejected the president's request and invited this partial government shutdown because of some principled objection that they just discovered in the last few weeks. It's not some principled discovery they've just made in the last few weeks. They brought this about because they're under a lot of pressure. We all know this, from their far left, and feel compelled to disagree with the president on almost anything, and certainly this. So that's where we are, but we don't need to be here for long. In order to get us out of this mess, a negotiated solution will need to check these boxes. It's really simple, Mr. President, really simple. It will need the support of 60 senators, which will obviously include a number of Democrats. It will need to pass the House, and it will need a presidential signature. That's how we make a law in this situation. 60 votes in the Senate, majority in the House, and President Trump's signature. That's what's needed. That's what will end this regrettable episode, reopen the lapsed portions of the federal government, and produce the investment in border security that our nation really needs. So I'm glad that productive discussions are continuing at this hour between my friend, the Democratic leader in the House, and the White House. When those negotiations produce a solution that is acceptable to all of those parties, it will receive a vote here on the Senate floor.